All right, let's just jump right in. What if I told you there's a book out there that claims a huge chunk of the history we all learned, from ancient Rome right through the Middle Ages, isn't a real record of events, but actually an elaborate artificial construction?
And that's really the core question we're going to be exploring today. It forces us to ask, is the story of our past something we've been slowly discovering piece by piece, or was it designed? You have to wonder if it was written by time, or maybe by a hidden group of architects with a master plan.
So for Exhibit A, just look at this. On the left, you've got the Roman Emperor Augustus. On the right, Charlemagne, the so-called father of Europe. Notice anything strange? Their key life events, becoming a leader, their coronations, even their deaths, they're all separated by an almost perfect 800-year gap. Is that just a bizarre one-in-a-million coincidence? Or is it the first clue that something is deeply, deeply wrong with our official timeline?
And that uncanny echo between Augustus and Charlemagne? Well, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. It turns out, history might be absolutely full of these hidden rhythms, these codes and patterns that are just way too precise to be natural.
This really radical idea comes from the book The Fabricated Past by a history analyst named Mario Arndt, and his thesis is, well, it's explosive. He's basically saying the historical record isn't something we've discovered, but something that was meticulously designed.
The way Arndt approaches this is really unique. He calls it history hacking. You see, as a former software developer, he treats history not like a collection of stories, but like a massive data set. He's essentially running a system analysis on it, looking for bugs, repeated lines of code, and artificial algorithms, anything that gives away the hand of a programmer. And to even begin to wrap your head around this kind of analysis, you have to adopt the mindset of the philosopher Paul Feyerabend. Anything goes. You have to be willing to question the most fundamental assumptions of historical science. So let's see how this theory actually gets built. The first and most obvious pattern Arndt claims to have found is this systemic, repeating 800-year cycle that seems to be woven throughout European history.
Now check this out. It's all about the rhythm of destruction and conquests. The fall of Troy, seen as the ancestor of Rome, happens in 1184 BC. Fast forward almost 800 years, and Rome itself is sacked by the Gauls. Wait another 800 years, it gets sacked again by the Visigoths. And then, yep, you guessed it, 800 years after that, New Rome, Constantinople, is conquered by the Crusaders. I mean, we're talking 4 world-changing events, all ticking along to the same 800-year clock.
Still think it could be a coincidence? Okay, fair enough. But let's look at Germany's Teutoburg Forest. In 9 AD, we have the famous Battle of Varus. 800 years later, Charlemagne's Saxon Wars kick off in the exact same region. And 800 years after that, the 30 Years' Wars ended right there with the Peace of Westphalia. 3 pivotal conflicts, same place, same 800-year interval. The odds are starting to feel a little crazy, right?
And it just keeps going. The Huns sweep into Europe in the 5th century, and who shows up 800 years later in the 13th century? The Mongols. 2 massive nomadic cavalry empires from the east arriving like clockwork.
Okay, and this is where it gets really strange. Even natural disasters seem to follow this pattern. The written sources describe a huge climate catastrophe and the Justinian plague back in the 6th century. And what happens 800 years later? Another climate catastrophe and the Black Death in the 14th century. But here's the twist. Modern scientific data, we're talking ice cores, tree rings, all the good stuff, it only shows hard evidence for one of those events, the one in the 14th century. This suggests the earlier event might just be a historical duplicate, a story literally copied and pasted 800 years into the past.
So if the timelines are a fabrication, what about the people in them? Well, Arndt argues that if you look closely at the names of medieval kings, you don't find a random succession of rulers. You find an algorithm.
The claim here is, it's audacious. He's saying the sequence of names for kings in the Holy Roman Empire isn't history. It's a mathematical pattern, a predictable, growing formula.
And this right here shows you the basic code. The pattern is CH number H. So you have a king named Conrad, followed by a king named Henry, then a growing number of other kings, and it always ends with another Henry. Then that whole block just repeats, with the number of kings in the middle growing each time. And here's the entire system laid out, from the year 911 all the way to 1313. You can see that repeating CHH structure clearly, but if you look closer, it's also divided into these perfect 113-year blocks, and each block aligns perfectly with a major ruling dynasty, the Ottonians, the Salians, and the Staufers. This isn't just a pattern, it's a highly structured architectural blueprint.
To really see just how unnatural this is, let's compare it to a control group. The names of British monarchs or U.S. presidents show no deep long-term mathematical structure. It's messy, it's random, it's real. The medievalists, by contrast, look like they were generated by a computer program.
So if the timeline is coded and the king lists are algorithmic, what happens when you apply this same logic to one of history's most iconic figures? Arndt uses Charlemagne as his final case study to deconstruct or completely unmake an emperor.
And this brings up another puzzle. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, was supposedly the most revered ruler of his age. So why did his name Charles completely disappear from the ruling families of France and Germany for over 300 years? That makes no sense. It would be like if no U.S. president was named George or Abraham for 3 centuries.
Arndt's solution is that Charlemagne isn't a real person from the 8th century at all. He's a phantom reflection, a historical composite, created by projecting the lives of 2 real kings from the 13th century, Charles of Anjou and Charles of Valois, back in time.
Take a look at this famous silver denier, which is supposedly a portrait of Charlemagne. Arndt argues this coin doesn't show a man from 800 AD, it shows Charles I of Valois who died in 1325. The artistic style, the facial features, he claims they're a perfect match for the later king, not the earlier one.
And the parallels go far beyond just a coin. Charlemagne's father was Pippin, Charles of Valois was Philip, and Pippin is just an old French form of Philip. Both had mothers with similar names. Both were crowned in Rome by the Pope. The biographies align so closely, Arndt argues one has to be a copy of the other, right down to their death dates, which he claims are linked by a complex numerical code.
So if we follow this logic all the way down, what are we even left with? It forces you to completely rethink what history even is.
Arndt makes a crucial distinction here. There is the past, the infinite, chaotic, and mostly lost reality of what actually happened. And then there is history, a man-made model of that past. All history is a model, a story we tell. But Arndt's work suggests our model isn't just selective, it may be entirely fabricated.